Welcome to the All Hoops podcast. I'm your host, Steve Inman, joined as always by star producer and co-host Chris Brito. We're breaking down the final division of our six, the Atlantic Division. We'll do some over-unders for those five teams. Plus, we're going to go into our 2022-2023 seasonal awards. Before we get started, Chris, my friend, basketball is back. The regular season is here. How are you?
What's up, Stevie? I'm so happy basketball's almost back.
Yeah.
I think we're less than 24 hours away. We're recording this Monday afternoon, so we're around like less than 24 hours away. No,
A little
yeah,
more than 24
little
hours.
more
By the
than
time we get
24
this
hours.
posted, it'll be under 24 hours.
Right. Anyway, I'm just so excited to see basketball again. I know it's been a few months of basically nothing. I mean, we had some like summer league and some Euro basketball, but there's nothing like the NBA. And like now that the Knicks look improved, um, I just can't wait to see what it actually looks like during the regular season, because the preseason already looked fantastic. And I actually think, Steve, that's a good way for us to start our little, season preview of the Knicks and like their division. So where do you think the Knicks will end up this season?
I think they're a very similar team to last year. I really do. I'm gonna say they're gonna go 41 and 41, which to me get them into the play-in, and then we'll see where it goes from there. You have to win two games probably on the road to make the playoffs at that point. They can easily do that. So I'm gonna say 41 and 41 over on the 38 and a half wins. Jalen Brunson's obviously a big help. I'm expecting a bigger year at RJ Barrett, but I think the Julius Randle we see is going to be closer to last year's Julius Randle than all NBA Julius Randle. And because of that, I just don't see them having a much higher ceiling than this.
I think their win total will be around that number as well. But Vegas has them at 38 and a half wins. I also think that's an over. Um, and to be honest with you, I just think that with the addition of Brunson, you give Randall less. And I think less is more with Randall. And I think if we see his efficiency improve and his 3-point shot improve, that just opens up the rest of the floor for the Knicks. And like now that we have Brunson, who can actually like drive through the hole and create lanes for like his teammates, I think that makes a huge difference. So, I have them being as better than at least the Raptors in this division. Um, just because the rest of the top looks like, the Celtics, the Nets, and the Sixers just look, they look like the three best teams in the division. I mean,
I think you're way off with Toronto. I mean, this is a team that won 11 more games than the Knicks this year. And we were going back and forth before the show about who's actually going to win more games this year, Toronto or the Knicks. I just think Toronto's continuity is going to be really used. They're a veteran team who has some young guys who can continue to get better. I think they're very well coached. I think they could be in a situation where they can be one team to put chips on the table to go out and get a big star if that happens, just like we talk about that with the Knicks. So their over-under is 45 and a half. What do you think there? I think we know the answer, but go ahead.
Oh, I'm doing under, man. I'm not saying they're going to take a big step back at all. I mean, but I just think it's too tough of a conference. They didn't really improve this offseason. And so that's where I think that's why I think really the Knicks are better. I think adding a point guard really makes that much of a difference for the Knicks. I know you probably disagree, but here we are.
I disagree. I just think Toronto has been really just underrated the last few years with their 48 wins, right? Last year, I think they have a lot of guys who can take over a game like Pascal Siakam, Van Vliet, Gary Trent. I think they've really figured out the center position where it's kind of a bunch of guys you kind of like, but they're not really investing too much money in one guy. And what I'm curious about with them is they seem very open to trading OG Anunoby, who I really like a lot. And you kind of roll your eyes. Oh, you're ready? Actually doing it right now. And just that I think they're asking a little too much out of him. He's a great 3-and-D guy. And I think they're asking him to do pick and rolls and all these different things. And I think this year they're going to be like, okay, that didn't really work with him last year. Let's just put him in a role we feel he's comfortable with, such as, a Mikal Bridges role. And I think that's a place he can thrive. And because of that, I think the continuity of knowing what works, what doesn't work in this offense will allow them to be a little better over there it had a little bit more of a scoring punch this year.
So I actually agree with that. I think that's smart of the Raptors if that's what they end up doing with OG. Uh, sorry, O. G.
You got it right. That's fine.
Um, and I don't, you know what? Like to me, OG reminds me a lot of what people expected out of Batum. Batum being like there was like expectations that Nick Batum back in the day when he was on the Blazers would become like, like this scoring threat and like a high scoring threat and like an all-star. He never really amounted to that, and I think that's what people expected out of OG. But I think a recalibration of expectations is fantastic for him because I think you put him in that role that he does best and let the others score. There's certainly enough people there who can score, but I also think his role might be a little bit. Where does he fit in a world where you have Pascal Siakam, you have Gary Trent, and you have all these different like young guys.
Yeah.
Where does OG kind of fit? Like he does feel expendable.
He feels expendable, but I just feel like you got to get something good for him. I think they were asking for the 7th overall pick this year, which Portland declined. But to me, that's a deal that around that number, that's what kind of makes sense. And it's interesting.
I would have done that trade if I were the Portland Trailblazers.
I think I would have done that trade if I was Portland as well. It's a little surprising because Portland like claims they're going for it, but yet doesn't really have a lot of defensive players still. And they take the kid who is probably the least ready of the NBA guys in Sharp.
His highlights look amazing, though.
Yes, they do.
They do. I was like, you know what? Good for the Blazers. They're thinking about the future here.
I don't know what they're thinking of, though. It doesn't really make sense because they're trying to build still around, Damian Lillard. And they said, hey, these two small guard thing isn't really working. Let's trade McCollum and get a second small guard, pay him $100 million. I don't know. I don't really get what they're doing, but we did Portland already. Let's go to a different confusing team, arguably the most confusing team in the NBA, and that's the Brooklyn Nets. 50.5 wins is their over under. And Chris, I think we both agree that if they're all healthy, they'll do this, but who knows if they're all going to be healthy.
So I think the Nets are actually going to be on a revenge tour. I think it all starts with Ben Simmons. Ben Simmons, being having the last few seasons, the ones that he's did, it seems to me like he's okay again. He's back to his old self. Like we saw some of the preseason highlights where his passing looked crisp. And I think that he might have his swagger back. And I think that's great for the NBA. And I think that's great for the Nets. The other added bonus is that, like, if Kevin Durant and Kyrie are injured, Ben Simmons can carry that Nets team by himself. And get some wins without those guys, right? And Kyrie, I feel like, is also on a mission, to prove detractors wrong or, whatever motivates him.
Maybe it might be money. I mean, all say like, hey, he was willing to take less money, but it's a guy not under contract next year. Maybe the motivation is to get that giant bag.
And you know what? Like, that might be a good enough reason for him to just play better or just show up, Kevin Durant is an all-world talent. There's no need an explanation for him, but I really do think the Nets are going to get more than 50 wins easily.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think this team is basically kind of being slept on right now because everyone picked them, including myself, to win the title last year. And
you're not ashamed of that?
Am I ashamed that I picked them? I mean,
as
they didn't really underachieve. They more just imploded, and it was spectacular in how terrible it was. And they somehow kept this group together after a really tumultuous offseason. And now I think they got the worst behind them. I'm actually going to say that. I think they can actually regroup here and, whether it's a last dance situation or not, I think they are going to be focused, as you said, and ready to go.
That's a great way of putting this, minus the 6 championship rings. But shout out to the Nets front office, who I think I was talking about smack earlier. this offseason because, what are they doing? Blah, blah, blah. But they have like so far, it looks like they've like calmed the storm in such a way where like it seems like the Nets are content with being with each other again. And I think that bodes well for the team moving forward. So yeah.
Yeah, I
Man.
agree. The other two teams, let's start with Philly. They obviously had a interesting playoff run where it seems like Embiid doing everything he can, and they just didn't get enough out of Harden. All of a sudden, Harden comes in the best shape of his career, and now everyone goes, "Oh, Philly instant contender, right? 50.5 wins. What do you see there?"
I'm inclined to go I'm inclined to go barely over on that one just because James Harden, when motivated and in shape, he's like a top 10 NBA player. And him combined with Embiid, assuming Embiid is healthy this year, I think that'll do great. I will say though, adding James Harden does hurt Embiid's MVP chances. So
Yes.
that's it.
I'm taking the over. I think this is the best team in the division. And unfortunately for us as Knicks, Mets, Giants fans, you got the Philadelphia Phillies who limped through the regular season, one of the last four teams standing in the NLCS. You have the Eagles who are undefeated. And now you're going to have the Philadelphia 76ers who I would say right now are my pick to go to the NBA Finals. I think this is their year. James Harden finally seems motivated. I think Doc Rivers has the ear of the stars on this team. I think Tobias Harris is underrated. He's always getting flack just because he's got a giant contract. And Embiid, to me, would have won the MVP the last couple of years if it wasn't for Nikola Jokic. So you're gonna have two MVP candidates. You have a really good team around them. They added some toughness, and we'll see where they're at. But if Harden continues to stay in shape, I don't see why he can't be the perfect partner for Embiid.
I think I'm with you on that one too. I think, adding PJ Tucker was a smart addition. I think they needed some veteran leadership that wasn't Embiid or someone like Harden. I think they needed someone who can like really sort of right the ship and be someone a voice really that can anchor this defense because they've seen mentally weak at times. And I
Yeah.
think having someone like Tucker will help.
And even if Tucker is not the same guy he was 5 years ago, just having him around, I think will help. And we were talking about it before the show about like the last time the Knicks had a really good team, they had guys like Jason Kidd and Camby and Thomas and these vets who are on their last legs, but those guys didn't put up a ton of scoring, but you still remember them as being really important to the team. So I could see that being a situation here. And I'm surprised their over under is 3 full wins less than the Celtics, but I think they're the team to beat in this division for sure. And let's get to Boston now. 53.5 wins, over or under, breezy.
I'm gonna go with under on this one. And it's not to disrespect the Boston Celtics, but they're a very talented team. And I think you could argue that they were just the healthiest team standing in the playoffs last year. And so I think that makes a huge difference heading into this season, and losing their coach, I think will also make a big difference. Um, we've seen obviously how coaching can help a team exceed expectations. We can also see how a coach can hurt those expectations, right? We're Giants fans. Like look at what coaching has done.
Yes.
So I think heading into the season, if that ends up being one of the bigger question marks, like I wonder, I just don't see them winning 53 wins. They might get it together by the time the playoffs start, but we'll see.
Yeah, I'm with you on this. I'm taking the under. I think we've overrated them a little bit after the finals run. And you see the young team, first time going to the finals. I could see a little bit of a NBA Finals hangover here, a tiny bit to start the season, where they're like, all right, the letdown of going from these huge pivotal games where your careers are defined to, all right, we got to play, the Magic tonight. And I think that might cause them to go more in the high 40s than 53.5 wins. The coaching situation obviously doesn't help. You're basically hoping that you got a great unproven coach twice in a row. That's a lot to ask for, especially for a guy who we're not really sure if he's the long-term guy. Is Ime Udoka taking over this team again?
Right.
Um,
And like that uncertainty, right? Like, oh, should we really listen to this guy if like he's just gonna be the
right.
coach for this year? Like, obviously, like it was smart. Udoka was fantastic in his first year. I'm not saying that inexperience means that you won't succeed as a coach, but you know what does? Stability. And like having that instability right now with the Celtics is like a dark cloud waiting to like pour over the Celtics season. So that's kind of my rationale with that too.
All right, Chris, last thing on these before we go to season award predictions. How would you rank these 5 teams?
I'd probably go Nets, Sixers, Celtics, Knicks, Raptors.
The Knicks above the Raptors. I hope you're right, but I'm going with Philly, Brooklyn, Boston, Toronto, the Knicks. I think Toronto is just a much better team right now than the Knicks. And we'll see how it goes, but so far you're hearing a lot of the same. I wish they would play more young guys kind of season, and I'm hoping that changes throughout the year. But I think a week from now we're going to be complaining about Fournier and Randall playing too many minutes over Grimes and Obi Toppin.
I mean, to be fair, Grimes looked rusty the other day for his preseason game, but you're right. In the long term, it's more important to develop those guys and know what we have than not. So,
All right. All right, Chris. Part of one of my favorite things we do on this show is our season award predictions. We've had some good hits and some bad misses in the last few years, but I'll go first. I'm going to go with Ja Morant for my MVP at plus 1,400. He's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, the eighth highest ranked guy. I think I've picked Luka Doncic the last couple of years. He has not done that, and now he's the favorite. I don't really want to pick the favorite, especially because I have other favorites for other awards. Ja Morant really came on the scene last year, and now that they, you know, have emerged, I think there'll be more national spotlight on him. You're going to see some more of his crazy highlight dunks. I can see his stats continuing to get better, especially with, Jaren Jackson out to start the year. You might need more scoring from Ja. And I think because of that, why not pick him to win the MVP?
so I'm gonna do a little cheating here.
Okay.
Luka's definitely the person I would put money on,
Okay.
which is not crazy to say. Um, but I actually think this year might be the year for someone like Devin Booker. Like
Okay.
I think that if Devin Booker just puts up crazy numbers and like has the Suns in a position again, despite everything around him, I think he could be someone who could win the MVP as well. Like the Suns have been disrespected so much that like it wouldn't surprise me if someone like him were to come out guns blazing and just like, having people put respect in his name.
The only reason why I feel like that doesn't work is because I think him and Chris Paul are going to continue to split votes. And you really need a guy who's kind of the far and away number one on his team. And who knows, maybe Chris Paul takes a step back this year as he continues to get
I
older. Maybe
so
Devin Booker takes a step forward. So it could happen.
so I sort of like that's in sort of my thinking with with Devin Booker. Like Chris Paul is not a young guy anymore, and it's just so evident to me that he has, and it's not a crime to have outside interests, but like Chris Booker's at this point of his career where basketball is not like I feel like the biggest priority. That being said, like it wouldn't surprise me if he didn't have another great season, but I think it's Devin Booker's time to shine here, and I think if the Suns do well in terms of the record, he might be in that conversation, Devin Booker. I like guys like Kevin Durant, Embiid, Giannis, Jokic. I just don't see it.
Yeah, I don't see Giannis and Jokic winning the third one. We've talked about it before. The third one is almost like impossible to get. And
Mhm.
because I think Harden's gonna have a bounce back year, I think that's gonna take some votes away from Embiid as well. So I think both of us have some pretty good odds on these two guys.
Agreed. Agreed. Let's move on to rookie of the year. So, okay, I know we've both expressed love for this one guy. Boncaro, fantastic forward for the Orlando Magic so far. Like summer league looked like he was like by far the best player. Was it preseason? No, the Pro AM, I think, or whatever.
Pro-am, yeah.
Yeah. He just looked above and beyond like the best player on the court. Um, we both love this guy. I think he'd be amazing, like rookie of the year. He deserved it. He was going to put up numbers. But I actually have like one pick that I think could also potentially be that, and I think it's going to be
Keegan
Keegan
Murray.
Murray, just because I expect the Kings to be part of that playoff conversation. And if he averages more than 15 points and is a steady contributor on a team that like will make the playoffs, I think that could be um, a good sign for him to win it. But he's kind of like my dark horse.
Keegan Murray to me, I think he's gonna have a good year. I think the problem is he's sharing, he's a front court guy sharing a front court with an all-star in Sabonis. So I think Sabonis is gonna take some of his touches and some of his rebounding opportunities. And
Mm.
because of that, I think he'll have a good year. I think he'll be on everybody's rookie ballots, but I don't see him taken away from Paolo, who basically has to score and put up numbers for Orlando to even have competitive games. So that's, I mean, you and I also are always trying to avoid picking favorites in these kind of things. And he is the overwhelming favorite at plus 185. The next closest guy is, Ivy and Murray at plus 500. But
Mhm.
I just think he looks so good for this right now. I think you have to take it.
Oh yeah. Is that where you're putting your money on?
That is who I'm putting my money on for sure. When
Okay.
we get to the next one, which is six man, I had a lot harder of a time with this because it's so hard to tell which of these guys are going to cook, but also cook enough where they stay as a six man and not move into the starting lineup. Like Christian Wood has already questioned his role as a bench guy. Who knows if that stays like that? I like Malcolm Brogdon for this. I think he's a guy who, if he stays healthy, is going to put up good numbers, efficient numbers. And I don't see that changing coming off the bench, but I could see a scenario where they're going, we might need a little more passing in our starting lineup compared to Marcus Smart. We might put the two of them in the backcourt together and go with those two guys with Brown and Tatum and then Horford or Robert Williams. But for now, I'm going to say Malcolm Brogdon off the bench at plus 1,500. He's been always one of my favorites, and I think they stole him from Indiana.
I'm inclined to agree with you, but I think for me, I look at the six man thing as sort of like opportunity, opportunity, and Christian Wood for me has the most space to make the most out of his opportunity. I think that with Dallas, like obviously all the attention goes to Luca, but he makes players better, and so I think that his pairing with Christian Wood is just going to help his numbers, and and if the Dallas Mavericks are a top three or top four team in the West, and you have Christian Wood who's a six man averaging like 18 points, 19 points a game, I think that to me is like a no-brainer. I think he's a six man of the year. He
Yeah,
he he may not like it. He may not like it, and I get it. But we've always said it doesn't matter who starts, it's who finishes. And Christian Wood will be on the floor or play a prominent role in that team.
I just have a hard time believing the Mavericks are going to probably put their second best player in off the bench the whole year. Now, stranger things have happened. It could happen. And if he does stay on the bench all year, I love this pick for you. I really do. And he's always been one of my guys where I think he's going to score and he's going to rebound and he's going to put up big numbers. And we'll see if it leads to winning. But I think he's a very good pick for you for sure. I like that one a lot. All right. Defensive player of the year. This was hard. I there wasn't a lot of guys who really jumped out to me. I think Robert Williams being the fourth guy at plus 1,000 and is going to miss the start of the year tells you everything you need to know about this award and how it's you're the best defensive player on a great defensive team. And to me, that's Bam Adebayo at plus 700. I think, you know, the Heat are always going to win with their defense. He's their best defensive guy. He's their anchor. I think with the Heat, I I don't know. I don't feel great about this one. I feel like I have no feel for this one compared to the other ones, but I'm going with Bam.
So I like Bam too. To me, it's split between Giannis and Evan Mobley. I think the Celtics are going to the Cavaliers are going to are going to improve a lot, and they've shown they've made strides on defense, and so it just makes sense to me that defense, like really, it's him and um, his the center is escaping me, but Mobley being one of the defensive anchors on that team, like really bodes. Oh, Jared Allen, him being that defensive anchor for a team that might make a jump this year. I think that's somewhere where I would probably like place a small bet. Um, if one were to do that, I like Giannis too, just because if the Bucks are also a top team, they're going to be dealing without Chris Middleton for a while. So I think their offense might suffer, and so this team might just have to like rely on their defensive, prowess to really be I'm not going to say survive, but to thrive really in the East. So like if you have the Bucks like sort of like neutralizing the Nets, who are supposed to be one of the better offensive teams in the year, like I think that really bodes well for a team like the Bucks. So
Yeah, I like that. And I'm curious if that's one of those awards where people go, all right, pick somebody else like they do with MVP, or do they give it to probably the best defensive player? So again, all these are narrative awards, and we're trying to get in the heads of people who will be voting on this. But if it's just about who's the best defensive player, which it should be, Giannis should be the pick, and you're correct there. So, all right, let's get to most improved. This one, I'm going with RJ. Why not? I think he's going to improve. He looked great in the second half of the year, and if he gets a little better based on the second half of the year, all the way through this year, he's going to put up 22, 23 points on better shooting. The Knicks should be improved, and I think he'll be a borderline all-star. And because of that, why not? Let's give it to RJ.
I'm going a different Nick route, although I really love that one. I kind of like the Jalen Brunson aspect of it all. I think that if he's someone who can lead this team and be if I'm being realistic, at like a playoff caliber team, and he's averaging like 20 points or like 18 points and like 7 assists or whatever it is, like I can see this award going to Brunson as well. I
Does
mean,
Brunson's incredible postseason run make writers not want to vote for him because, oh, he already did his improvement last year?
that was like the same argument for RJ Barrett though.
But like his numbers were baked in to the award. Like, this is a regular season award. So it's like regular season 2021, the regular season 2022, Brunson could have the most improved numbers. But are we factoring in his playoff run, or do we not count that at all and say that wasn't part of this award?
I don't think you count it, but here's where I sort of lie with that. Brunson, mostly because Brunson like just took advantage of offensive vacuum in Luka's absence, and so like that's why I don't think the numbers necessarily apply from there. And I'm curious what he'll do with the opportunities here in New York. Like, here's a chance for you to run your team, a chance that you really never, that you got only in the absence of Luka, really. I'm excited to see what Jalen Brunson does in New York, though.
Yeah,
And
I am too.
I hope one of us is right, though, about the most improved.
That would be great. I hope so. All right, last one. Coach of the year. Chris, let's start with you. What are you thinking?
Ty Lue for me. I think Ty Lue, like he's sort of been one of the most underrated coaches in the NBA the last few years. I think um you know, the Clippers have been dealing with injuries these last few years. And if you get a nice top three finish for the Clippers, I don't see why Ty Lue doesn't get it. You know, Ty Lue has done such a great job with the with what he's had in the absence of Paul George and Kawhi. I think he deserves it.
I like Chris Finch. I think Minnesota is going to have one of the biggest win total jumps, and you're going to give credit to the coach. And I think he's a guy like you think of the other guys who are possible for this. Monty Williams has gotten some bad press about the has he talked to Aiton in the last 6 months thing. You have Steve Kerr who's won every award possible. I think Taylor Jenkins won this last year, right? So I think it really comes down to guys like Chris Finch or Ty Lue. So I think we're both right on the money here. And I like Finch more because I think people will say, "Oh, he doesn't have as much talent as Ty Lue." But it's not really fair to Ty Lue where he and this training staff are going to be the ones who are going to try to manage a very thin line of how do we get Kawhi and Paul George enough rest while also getting a top seed. So Ty Lue is going to deserve a lot of credit for that. And if I were in the NBA and I expect them to have a 50+ win season, he would be my vote too. So I get that.
Yeah. And I sort of expect it to go exactly the way you're saying it too, because we know Kawhi is not going to play all 82 games and probably not Paul George either. And just getting those like gritty wins that they've had in the last few years for the Clippers, I think that'll be really telling to see how far they'll go in the playoffs too. So, yeah.
All right, Chris, that's our awards 2022, 2023. They are locked in. Let's get to our final thoughts right after this. All right, Chris, final thoughts time here. How about Jordan Poole getting $140 million? That's $35 million a year. He's a very good player coming off a breakout year. But Chris, did the punch actually get him a lot of money?
So that's a conspiracy theory I'm inclined to believe, because I sort of expected this deal to go down after the season. And with Draymond potentially like leaving next year, depending on what he does with his opt out, having Jordan Poole resign now and like at such a nice price tag that it's going to send the Warriors into like a big luxury tax. I like it for them. I like the deal for the Warriors. Like, we talk about it a lot in terms of other teams sort of like going over the cap to sign these players and like whether it's a mistake or not. Like, first of all, it's not really their money. But second of all, like the Warriors are okay with being in the luxury cap in the penalty. So hey, if it's not a problem for them, it's not a problem for me. And Jordan Poole is worth that money.
You said this perfectly over the weekend where, yes, 35 million a year sounds very strange for Jordan Poole, but at the same time, it's not like they could use that 35 million on somebody else. You could use that to bring your own guys back. You can have this giant tax bill. And if the owners are willing to do it, then all the power to them. And you can't fault the contract because if he's making, 7 million versus 35, they're paying it either way. Why be upset about it? So good
And
job by them bringing him and Wiggins back. And I have to wonder, as you said, what does this mean for Draymond? What does this mean for Klay Thompson? Is this the new era, or are they just going to where they're going to push those older guys aside after a year? Or is this a year where they're going to say, we have to find a way to bring everybody back? And these are just the first two guys.
And I'm sort of inclined to give the Warriors front office the benefit of the doubt in terms of rebuilding this team out of nothing. I mean, they literally found Jordan Poole in I believe in the late first round or
Late
second.
first round out of Michigan, yeah.
And that is an achievement in itself, that you found a player that worthy like to build your next movement of the Warriors championship era. Uh, kind of like how the Spurs did it for so many years, and like that's sort of like where I see the comparison. Like they definitely deserve the benefit of the doubt now, so that's where I go.
Yeah, no, I love it. I think that's definitely the case for sure. Um, I also think it makes the RJ Barrett extension look a little better too, where oh he might get 107 million. That seems like a lot, and then all of a sudden Tyler Hero gets more money, and then Jordan Poole gets more money than that. And I take RJ over either one of those guys. So good job, New York Knicks. Final thing for me, Charles Barkley has a new 10-year deal with TNT worth well north of 100 million, could approach 200 million according to the New York Post. It's awesome because he kept talking about when his contract was up in a year or 2 years, I forget. He was retiring, he was done, he didn't want to do this much longer, and all of a sudden bam, giant deal, he's back. The entire TNT crew has been re-upped, and we're going to see more of inside the NBA for a long time.
And we also talked about this before the show, where like they just make basketball so much fun. I mean, basketball's already fun, but they, delve in. They sort of delve in, like they poke fun at the narratives. They sort of like make their own narratives, and they just make basketball so entertaining. I'm happy to see them back, all of them. I think all of them adds a unique sort of touch to the show, and I'm happy to see it, re-upped, as you said.
Yeah, it's great to see. And Chris, anything else you have before we wrap up the show?
Yeah, I just really wanted to talk about the Redeem doc that we've been seeing like pushed on all different sorts of platforms. And I'm not necessarily like disappointed, but to me it was definitely it definitely seemed to me that the doc was sort of pushing the narrative that like the Team USA team that won in 2008 was like a pack of like underdogs, trying to reclaim the throne and all of that. But to me, what it really exposed what it was that the team was like the team and leadership, they were just like unprepared, arrogant, and they got their due because the rest of the world was catching up. And I think that Spain team was so underrated. I mean, they hung in there with, you know, of course Spain had some NBA players, but not to the caliber of what Team USA had. The fact that the game was so close, such a like even the, it's a moral victory, but I was really impressed with like revisiting that because I did see the game, but like revisiting that and seeing how well Spain played, like it makes you think like, oh, this Team USA team almost lost to Spain, you know, but here we are, and like it's good for basketball though that the rest of the NBA today is such a melting pot. Like you have star players from Greece, Slovenia, Serbia. The NBA is in great hands, and now we have Women Yama coming up. Like I can't wait, man.
Yeah,
The
I
game
agree with
is-
you. I think they did a good job with it. It wasn't great where they made it seem like these were underdogs and these games were so much closer than they really were. Like they blew out most of these teams. And oh my God, they're within 9 points in second quarter. And I don't know. I thought they overhyped it a little bit, but at the same time, it was really cool to see, Kobe's and the Carmelos and the Dwayne Wades again doing really cool things. So the
wasn't
Spain
that so
game,
wasn't that so laughable when there's like, oh yeah,
yeah,
they were
no,
with
for sure.
9 points and 10
Oh
points.
my God, Greece is within 20. Like, but it was still good. I'm glad they did it, and hopefully, we get plenty more docs along the way. But that is going to do us for us here on the All Who's podcast. Chris, I thank you so much. Next time we talk, we'll be able to recap NBA action that counts.
Can't wait for that. Thank you, Steve. See everyone.